Hello.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you, Carwyn.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, it's good to see you too, Fiona. So here we are then.
So this is our virtual Welsh cheese and, well, not just wine, drink tasting. Fortunately, the cheese is not virtual, the cheese is real, which is very encouraging. I guess that some of you will have got the whole set of cheeses in front of you. And some of you will have all the drinks, and some of you may have some of the drinks. And even if you don't, we can talk about them and what you might drink if you haven't got a drink in front of you. But what we're going to talk about first of all is, of course, number one is the cheese. And so, Carwyn, tell us what you've got lined up for us. Tell us about the first cheese.
Okay, well, I think it's quite fitting to say that, really disappointed I can't be at the festival this year. But nevertheless, I'm trying to create something as best as possible in front of the screens here today. And hopefully you can have a little bit of a tasting that I would normally do at the Abergavenny Festival, really, giving out my samples and engaging with the public. And the first one I would have here, really, is the Caerphilly, quite a fitting cheese. And it's called Thelma's Original. And it's Caerphilly is a unique type of cheese, really. You got to have the right texture, the right color, and obviously the right taste. So the minute you sort of bite into a Caerphilly, you instantaneously know it's a Caerphilly, and because of its unique sort of lemony initial sharpness, really, more than anything. And that's the sort of the difficult part of making sure a Caerphilly is always a Caerphilly, because cheese generally in the cheese making room wants to become something a bit more like the rubbery sort of texture. So you have to really work on this cheese to make sure and keep it nice and fluffy, so it doesn't go sort of too elasticy. So it's quite a hard cheese to make, if you know what I mean, Fiona.
I like the idea of a fluffy cheese.
Well, yes.
Sounds appealing. Is it quite a young cheese?
Yes, you can eat Caerphilly pretty much the day it's made. I mean, I quite often go in there and I'll just have a little bit of a nibble to see if you've got the nice silky curds. And my dad used to eat it when he was a little whippet snatcher about a week after it was made, and it would progress up until about 6 weeks of age. This example we've got here today, and hopefully in front of people as well, is a Thelma's version, which has got a natural rind on it, aged in its rind for about 6 to 8 weeks. So you get a little bit of a breakdown on the outside when it's a bit more golden, but it retains its fresh, creamy sort of citrusy feel in the middle.
And is it a Welsh cheese by origin?
Oh, most definitely, yeah. The history of it is, you cannot sort of recreate this anywhere until you understand the story, why it was made and why it was taken away from the Welsh industry, really. It's a cheese that could be eaten pretty quick. Generally, it's quite salty at the beginning, and then it matures and ages a bit more with a bit more depth of flavour as it gets older. So, whereas other cheeses would be made across the world and they'd be more drier and sort of have a bit more intensity to it. This was designed really so you could eat it straight away and fester on it for several weeks, but still be very, very palatable.
It's a very gentle cheese in a way, and that doesn't mean bland. It's got lots of flavour and texture, crumbly texture, which I really love. So it is a particularly nice cheese to kick off with. You may notice, if you've seen the lineup of drinks, that we're kind of focusing on drinks you might not think of pairing with cheese. Everybody thinks, oh, when you think wine and cheese, you think, oh, well, red wine. And, red wine obviously works really well. But first of all, we were trying to focus on Welsh drinks. Not a lot of red wine in Wales. There is some. There's some Pinot Noir, but I mean, you all know that red wine goes with cheese. So actually, it's quite fun to explore things you might not be so familiar with. And the first pairing I've come up with, because I think I've tasted it with Caerphilly before, is a Chardonnay, which may surprise you. So this is a Welsh Chardonnay from Anchor Hill, and it's a 2018. Well, many interesting things about this. It's organic and it's biodynamic, and it's also only 10% by volume. So that's really quite light, particularly for a Chardonnay. I mean, if you think about Chablis, for example, which is also Chardonnay, that would tend to be 12.5, 13%. So really, really light. So if we take a little sip of that, have you got it, Carwyn?
Yeah, just yeah.
So have a little sip and see what you think of it with the cheese.
It's really fresh.
It's really
quite light, quite almost a little bit fruity for me at the moment. And then,
so I mean, what I always think that's interesting about white wine and cheese is that, as I've said, we kind of think of red wine with cheese, but actually, if you think about the kind of fruits that go with cheese, particularly apple, it makes sense to think, well, actually, a drink that has some kind of appley flavors in it will go with that cheese too.
Yeah, definitely taste that. I can actually feel it coming through, and that's something that we'd normally eat with Caerphilly anyway. Is something quite fresh and quite light. So it really matches up quite well. Quite unexpected for me, really, because you know.
It doesn't overwhelm the cheese, does it?
Not at all. No, you still get the flavour of the cheese after I've had my second sip now, and I can still feel a little bit of cheese. So they blend up really nicely together.
It really balances quite well. By the way, there is a facility if anyone wants to comment or ask a question. Those of you who are familiar with Zoom, there's a bar at the bottom, which there's a chat, which means you can just chat, comment. Like if you kind of think, yeah, I would never have thought of that, or not really for me, whatever you want to say. Someone immediately coming in. Let's just see. Absolute heaven. Oh, well, that's really nice. Good.
It does work well. You know, it surprised me a little bit there.
There's also a Q&A. So if you suddenly kind of like, you know, you want to ask another question, does anyone else make Chardonnay at 10%? I'd be hard pushed to think of another country that can do that. So actually, this is very much a British thing. These very low alcohol wines, which are quite nice to have. Now, I don't know whether you, Carwyn, have the other Chardonnay. There are two Chardonnays.
Yes, I do, yeah.
Good. So let's try that alongside at the same time. So this is it's also Chardonnay, but utterly different. So it's a Novas Gran Reserva from a producer called Emiliana. It's based in Chile, and it's 14.5%. So a completely different animal.
Oh yes, the aroma is quite much more stronger.
It's much richer, and let's have a little taste of that. It's kind of richer and riper. So where the other one's kind of like apple, this is much more peach, almost borderline mango, isn't it? It's kind of tropical fruits. So we could try a bit of that cheese again with it.
I can still taste the milky freshness coming through on the cheese, which is good. It sort of makes you want to reach for a little bit more wine then.
It's actually, again, I think...
A bit more acidic, this one, isn't it? I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of preference and style. I mean, for some people, that first Chardonnay might be a bit light, whereas for some people, it might be, oh, I really like that. It's perfectly fresh. And, you know, other people might say, well, I like that richer Chardonnay. You know, I like the way it kind of brings out the richness and the butteriness of the cheese. You know, there's no right or wrong about these things. It's just kind
of... No, not really. It's just your preference, really, I suppose, at the end of the day, isn't it?
It's also kind of like, you know, well, who knew? You knew Chardonnay and Caerphilly.
I'd prefer the Anchor Hill, because, you know, I'm not accustomed to eating too much cheese or with my wine and vice versa, really. So for me to start off doing them together would be perfect that way, and then maybe I progress on something a bit stronger like this one.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we
Yeah.
go to the next cheese?
Okay, well, the next cheese I've got for you to try is Caws Cenarth Brie.
Oh, wait a
This
minute.
one.
Sorry, I thought aren't we doing black?
Oh, sorry, the black sheep. Yes.
Sheep? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is pretty much made a similar sort of style as a Caerphilly. Slight different variation in terms of the fact that we've got sheep's milk here, which is naturally higher in protein and butter fat as well. And also the fat molecules are a lot smaller. They're almost naturally homogenized. So you get much more sort of softer, creamier, more velvety type of texture really than you would from a cow's milk cheese. So automatically you get a different flavor profile, a different texture immediately. Wonderful milk to work with. Pretty much underrated in cheese world really, particularly in the UK, but it's actually developing really well at the moment. And we're really quite lucky that we can actually make some cheese with sheep milk. So one of the sort of the main things as well is that you get sort of a sweeter flavor to it, and also a little bit nuttiness coming through at the end.
It's quite savoury and tangy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
No, almost a little bit of saltiness, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is about a 5-month aged example that we've got here. So it's had time to develop. And normally this, you get this sort of flavour with a Caerphilly after maybe 3 months, 3.5 months, but you would need a little bit longer with the sheep's milk to actually break down the protein and the fat to get that flavour released. So
there's a question that popped up. So this one, so about the Caerphilly actually, can you eat the rind on a Caerphilly?
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's generally, the rind is the most wonderful thing about a cheese really, is that protects the lovely core in the middle. I mean, these are all natural sort of molds and yeasts that grow on the surface of the rind. They grow next to the perlasse, which is our blue cheese. So you get this wonderful sort of flora growing on the outside. It's generally quite a little bit stronger, perfectly safe to eat. If you find it not quite to your palate, then you can just trim it off. But don't waste it. Put it under the grill or put it in a soup or something. So yeah, you definitely can eat the rind. I pretty much eat it all the time.
Not the rind on the black sheep, which is a wax rind.
Absolutely, definitely not on the black sheep. No.
Okay. Right, let's try. I won't sort of describe the wines again, but why don't you just try a sip of each of these wines that we started off with?
So a little bit of the Anchor Hill left.
And see what you think.
Again, really, really easy to match. Absolutely fantastic. Really enjoy that. You just want to reach out for a little bit more. You get the both of the flavors still in your mouth afterwards, which is really, really nice, rather than one overpowering the other. So the Anchor Hill Chardonnay really works well for me. I quite like that. Yeah. Probably my favorite, if I be truthful.
The rich Chilean Chardonnay with that sheep cheese, because it's just a little bit more full-bodied. And the cheese is a bit stronger, so I quite enjoyed that with it. I mean, I thought they were both really nice. And I mean, if you were thinking about other things with sheep cheese generally, I find that Rioja is, if we're talking reds, is a really good red to eat and drink with sheep cheese, because in Spain they generally have sheep cheeses like Manchego.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, that definitely worked better. You're quite right. There's a bit more age in the black sheep than a Caerphilly, and the strength match is probably better. So, yeah, that's good for me too.
But fun, you know. Yeah. I mean, fun to try, and you know, people are funny about Chardonnay these days. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't really like Chardonnay," but as you can see from those two styles, they're totally different. And so, you know, chances are, if you don't like one style, you might like the other. So
definitely, yeah. It's definitely inspired me anyway, because you know I often get asked what's the best wine to go with this, that, and the other. And it's a bit worrying sometimes what to recommend, but you know, it just goes to show that it can match with a lot of cheeses. You know, even a difference in two wines there, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, I think quite fun. Okay, yep. Right. Let's go on to the Brie, shall we?
Yeah, so this Brie is quite an aged example. This is pretty close to its probably best before use by. They take a little bit of time to age. The Cenarth Brie is similar to sort of our Carwyn. It's got a lovely white bloomy rind on it. And don't be alarmed when you see the bloomy rind starting to go a little bit brown. that shows that there's a bit of age to it. And what we'd be looking for really is sort of a uniform ripeness from right the way through. And this allows time for all the enzymes to work and break down the lovely the fat and the protein, so you get that full flavour. If you want to get a bit more flavour, just age it a bit longer. And this one happens to be a pretty powerful, sort of quite aged example, really. So initially you get quite a bit of flavour at the beginning, and then it sort of leaves a long, lingering sort of mushroomy, sort of savoury flavour at the back of the mouth. So really quite sort of full flavour cheese.
I think that's a really, really delicious cheese. I like drinks that have red berry flavors with Brie, in almost the same way as you can sort of like, you know, you can sit and you can have a really nice Brie in front of you. You can have like a pile of cherries or a few strawberries or something like that. And they're delicious with it. So the two drinks I picked to go with that were sparkling rosé, which is you know, which is a bit radical and out there, but here we are. So here's Anchor Hill again, maker of that first Chardonnay, the very light Chardonnay, and this is their rosé. Again, really light. It's only 10% again, so really, really fresh. And I really like the way, first of all, you've got a little bit of red fruit coming through. And then it just kind of freshens up your whole palate because the cheese is quite rich. And then you've got this lovely kind of great sparkly wine kind of dancing across the palate. And I think that's a really delicious combination.
I think you're quite right about the palate cleansing. Quite a bit of that before the last piece. Completely sort of cleanse everything in the mouth, ready for another little piece.
I mean, you can I mean, any kind of pink fizz you can do it with. You could do it with, you know, you could do it with cava or something like that, a cava rosado, or there's a lot of sparkling pink wines around nowadays. A lot of English and Welsh producers now doing amazing sparkling wines. We do have some of the best sparkling wines in the world actually now. And so anyway, that's the Anchor Hill one.
Really impressive, that one.
And again, from across the channel, slightly different style. Do you have this one too?
Yeah, I've got that one, yeah.
Okay, so this is what's called a Cremel. So it's kind of a sparkling wine that isn't champagne, but made in a similar way. And it comes from Alsace, the Alsace region of France, to the east of France. Yep. And they make quite a lot of sparkling wine. They're better known for their aromatic wines like Riesling and Gewürztraminer, but they also make some really, really nice fizz. And this is from the Turkheim cooperative. It's called Meiling, and yeah, it's a little bit different from the Anchor Hill. It's a bit richer, a little bit toastier in the way that you would expect champagne to be. So see how that goes for you.
Yeah, definitely a little bit more richer, that one.
And that is
the Brie goes really, because the Brie is quite strong, generally sort of overtakes everything in your mouth. But having the sip of that first and having the Brie, it sort of mellows the Brie a little bit down, and then the combinations just really work towards the back of the mouth.
I mean, it's like biting into a fresh strawberry, isn't it? It's like if you bite into fresh fruit, it's a little bit sweet, but also it's a little bit sharp, isn't it? It's can be kind of palate cleansing too. Yeah. So this is kind of like what these wines are doing, really. They're kind of like giving you a little break in the middle. As you eat the cheese, you know, it refreshes your palate between each mouthful. And, you know, nice thing to do on a sunny afternoon like this, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sit with a, you know, bit of bread, some Brie, And a glass of bubbly. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah, and that's sort of the mantra that I've always sort of thought about with my cheeses. Really, is sort of outside eating with lovely drinks, with good friends, company, and just make a meal out of it. So you don't really have to go and spend time cooking or anything. You just carry on the evening throughout and enjoy all the food in front of you, and makes pleasant time. And having the variety of cheeses, the idea behind. I've developed all these really is so that you do have a lot of different flavors, and it's a topic of interest then. So each one of these hopefully will have a different flavor to give you, and good chance to open another bottle of wine, isn't it? A different bottle. So that's what I think anyway.
Just looking at the questions to see. Okay, good question here. Is it possible to freeze any of these wonderful cheeses, either whole or grated?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of talk about freezing cheeses. Yes, you can. We've freezed cheeses quite successfully. There is a slight difference in the texture. There's no doubt about it. It changes the texture very slightly. We've had some cheeses that come out and the texture is a little bit more looser. It's a little bit more runnier, particularly on a soft cheese. But if you have got too much cheese in your fridge and you're going away in a holiday, well, it wouldn't be the case at the moment maybe. But if you have got a little bit too much cheese, put it in the freezer. And the most important part is to thaw it out slowly. So take it out of your freezer and put it in the back of the fridge and let it thaw out very, very slowly. And generally, it'll be about 90 to 95% of its original texture. The harder the cheese, generally, the more successful they are, really. So we got a lot of customers come in and they buy quite a few cheeses and they'll put them in the freezer straight away. So they do, but not quite as good as the original article.
No, I mean, in general, I don't, but I do when I've kind of, as I say, like if I'm just going off for a few days and I'm not going to finish it off, and I've got a bit of excess, or kind of like those little kind of scrappy bits at the end, like have a few bits and pieces, then you can kind of like use as a pizza topping or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. There's everything we make is 100% freshly made, but there's freezing techniques is quite commonplace in some types of cheeses where it can lend itself quite well, but you wouldn't be able to do it on these sort of styles really at all. But for home use and for wastage issues, then it's perfect.
The other thing I was going to say that perhaps we should stress, is that I was always taught, and I think it's right, that actually you should take the cheese out of the fridge about 45 minutes or so before you want to eat it, because otherwise if you take it straight out of the fridge and eat it straight away, you don't get you get like half the flavor.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's one of the things I should have said at the beginning, really. I mean, I brought my cheeses out that I got here around about 12 o'clock and I left them at room temperature since 12 o'clock. And that's the way I like to eat my cheese. So it relaxes. You get all the sort of the proteins start to give more flavor. And generally, that's how you should eat these particular types of cheeses. And also, you've got more flavors going on in your mouth then, so you can get more instantaneous burst of flavor. So, and they're good enough to fridge back afterwards, so don't worry about them being out for hours. I mean, most cheese is safe anyway to put back in your fridge straight afterwards. So a lot of people say, oh, I've got to eat it straight away, put it back. No, it's fine. I mean, that's nature of cheese. Cheese, if you leave it out, will just ripen quicker. That's all it is. So as you can see, the golden I got here is actually starting to run away, but so that's how I like to
let's move on to that, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Tasting. So tell us about the Golden Cenarth.
Okay, well, the Golden Cenarth is the cheese that we had Supreme Champion back in 2010. It's one of our flagship cheeses. It's quite a unique type of cheese. It starts off life pretty much like look like a little bit of a fresh Brie, really, but we wash it in cider about 5 times. So what we're trying to
wash, I mean, do you kind of like dunk it, or do you rub it, or what? How does it work?
It's quite an art, really. You don't really want to make the cheese too wet, but you just really want to rub it very gently at the surface because they are quite soft and they will break apart. So it's quite a procedure, really. So we take the cheese and literally dip your fingers into a bowl of cider, and we'll rub the top around the sides on the underneath as well, and we'll put it back in the rack. It's quite labour intensive, but the Cistercian monks brought this out, and when they were fasting, that they wanted more flavour in the cheeses that wanted when they were fasting, and basically it develops a little bit of a bacterial rind on it, and it grows this lovely sort of red hue all around it, and with little bits of white of this sort of the penicillin that grows through. And that actually, the red bacteria then actually, it has an enzyme that actually breaks down the protein and the fat in a different way than it would be to a Brie or to other cheeses. So you get a lot of complexity of flavor in there. So it might start off life exactly like a Brie, but the conditioning that we do in the ripening will actually make that cheese taste totally different. And you wouldn't think they're from the same family, but they are. So.
And it is stronger, isn't it? It's a stronger flavour. And as time goes on, particularly if you kind of wash them more, rub them more, they can get quite stinky, can't they?
Oh, they can do, yeah, absolutely. People say, well, this is going to smell my whole house out, but generally the aroma is far more powerful than the bite. It's because that's where all the activity is going on. That's where the protein is breaking down on the surface. So you get a lot of this ammonia release, but actually when you come to taste it, it's nowhere near as strong. So it's actually quite a pleasant surprise, really. And then that's what gets you hooked into rind wash cheeses. When I first started getting into cheese, it was one of the cheeses I couldn't sort of eat. But now it's probably one of my favorite cheeses, so I go for them straight away. But you have to have that confidence at the beginning.
It's a cheese of yours I was most familiar with, and which I've always enjoyed, particularly at Accompany. I always make a beeline for that and taste that. I mean, it is quite strong, but it's kind of like, it's like one of those unfamiliar flavors that you kind of like, when you first taste, oh, I'm not sure about this. And then you kind of like start getting into it, and then it becomes, mildly addictive.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I've got this sort of, when I eat it, particularly when it's like running like this or quite ripe, you've got this sort of hammy, sort of savory taste coming through, which is quite unique, really. So I quite like it for that. So yeah, it's quite nice, and it's quite diverse in what you can do with it. You can eat it a little bit younger, bake it in the oven, or just let it ripen until it's really quite red and really quite aromatic, and eat it on the table like this. So it's a sort of cheese you kind of need to know a bit about the cheese and how you like it. It's best.
Can you bake it in its box like a camembert and kind of dunk?
Yeah. That's exactly what we brought it out for to begin with. It's trying to get people to eat cheese in a different sort of way, not in a cheese board or however they want to eat it, but actually as a sharing platter for two at least. And that was the idea behind it. So quick and easy, wrap her off, put it in the oven.
Another thing that's really, really delicious that are kind of like little, those little kind of mini new potatoes?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you kind of like spike them with a fork and you kind of dunk them in the hot cheese, and it's so good.
It is, yeah, very nice.
Anyway, so because it's washed in cider, and because I thought it'd be interesting to try, I've paired a cider with it. And so it's Welsh cider, some really, really good cider in Wales. I think,
yes,
one absolutely. Of the Wales is really, really good for. And it's a cider called Orchard Gold. I'm not sure have you got the bottle there?
No, I just tipped them out. So, Gwyntydraig, that one is, yeah.
I cannot pronounce. I'm just like...
Gwyntydraig, that's what
it's
pronounced.
Anyway, it's a medium cider. I would say it's medium sweet rather than medium dry. Personally, I'd probably go for a slightly drier cider, but I like the effect. I mean, again, you've got this cheese and apple thing going on. More obviously perhaps than with the Chardonnay. I think a strong cider is a great partner for a cheese like that. Even sometimes you can find apple sort of apple liqueurs or kind of like apple brandy type drinks. There's a kind of company called Somerset Cider Brandy. And they have a kind of pomona, which is like the Normandy pomo. And that's just, like, the stinkier the cheese gets, the stronger the drink. So you can kind of like go with something with a bit more alcohol. But I think this is not too fierce. It's quite a tame one. It's not going to bite our heads off.
No, that's right.
Anyway, I think cider is a nice accompaniment.
Yeah. Definitely, it's I enjoy it. It really went well. Seems a bit strange for me to have cider with a cheese that I've washed quite a bit of cider into it, but it's the idea was not to be able to taste the cider in the cheese, but actually use the cider as a development of the rind. That's the idea behind it. So it works really, really well, to be honest. I mean, I was quite surprised.
it's sort of like cooking a stew with wine in.
Yeah.
And when you do that, the wine cooks down, so that all you get is a kind of richness, kind of vaguely winey taste, but it's not obviously winey. And then, like, if you were having a wine with it, you'd be sort of drinking wine with a winey stew. So it's the same kind of thing going on.
I think so. You're right, actually. Yeah.
It's subtle in the cheese.
Yeah.
But then you're kind of like just kind of paying homage to that that drink being used for it, and drinking cider with it. You could also drink a strong beer with it, I think. And
so the rind I've got here on my golden is actually quite strong, quite powerful, quite well broken down. But the minute I reach for the cider and try the rind, then it sort of mellows the rind a little bit as well, which makes the whole experience far more pleasant. Because that's where the sort of the biggest pungency would be on the outside of the cheese of this style. So, but I still get a lot of very much creamy notes, almost very mellow sort of lightness coming through at the end. So it's good. I like it.
Okay, let's do the last cheese because we need time and not overrun. I'm very excited about this last pair.
Yeah, you are, aren't you?
Tell us about the cheese.
Okay, well, I'm pouring a bit of the Avon Mail then. Okay, the last cheese we've got is Dollas. As many of you might know, Dollas is one of our main cheeses here at Caws Cenarth, and we wanted to make something very similar to Dollas, but with sheep's milk. So we actually took the recipe from Dollas and just replaced the recipe with sheep's milk. We didn't do any other changes whatsoever, but the result is totally and utterly different to Dollas, and that's purely down to the milk, like I explained a little bit earlier with the black sheep. We got more protein, more butter fat, and the butter fat is actually of a smaller size, so it looks as if it's more broken down than it is at a very young age, and it takes its time to break down. And when we actually get the blue to grow in the middle of the cheese, it's quite a bit of blue in it, but the blue generally has got some enzymes which releases into the cheese, and that breaks down the butter fat and the protein, and gives that extra sort of the flavor you get from the small amino acids developing. But because there's so much butter fat and protein in a sheep's milk, it takes longer to break it all down. So you get more of a slower developed type of cheese. So when you first eat this cheese, you wouldn't think necessarily you're eating a blue cheese. I've converted so many people to eat blue cheese by just having a nibble of this blind. So when you first eat it, you almost misses the first part of your tongue and goes straight to the back, where you get this immediate sort of toffee flavor around about here. Really delightful, very, very sweet, something that you wouldn't sort of get with a lot of blue cheeses. So I would recommend a sheep's blue as a means of starting off into blue cheese. Because
not everybody likes blue cheese.
No, and the reason is because the blue cheese can be quite, it breaks down so much of the fat and the protein. It gives an awful lot of flavor. So you have to look for something that hasn't got a lot of strength in there. So,
and drinks wise, so blue cheese is often paired with sweet wine, most commonly port.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the classic pairing, port and Stilton. But you can, in fact, drink other sweet wines with a blue cheese. I mean, you could go for something like a Sauterne with this cheese. But my new discovery, which I'm really, really excited about, is this Welsh Mead, which I tasted recently. And okay, so how do I pronounce that? Avon Mail? Is that right?
Yeah, pretty close. Avon Mail. The F comes out a bit more like a V, so Avon Mail.
Okay, Avon Mail. Okay. Yeah. And it's a heather mead. So mead is basically a drink that's brewed from honey. And they make a range. This is their heather mead. And I mean, just amazingly kind of floral and exotic. Needs to be served really, really super cold and in little glasses. And
little shot glasses.
In little shot glasses would be lovely. It's got one of the great 3-star Great Taste Awards. So, it's done really well in competitions. it's to me, this is a really, really exciting drink that I would, I would think great drink to put on the Christmas table. Someone, in fact, has actually asked about, not about what to drink at Christmas, but what is the best cheese to accompany red wine or a port planning for Christmas?
Good question.
So,
what do you recommend, Fiona?
Port, blue cheese is definitely the traditional pairing. And I hope that those of you who've tried the mead will be kind of like, oh, right, I'm going to wow everyone at Christmas with a mead. They also do a blackberry mead, which is fantastic as well. Personally, with red wine, kind of depends a little bit on the cheese. I mean, if you were having a Brie, I would go for a Pinot Noir, probably at Christmas, if you were looking for a red wine. And if you're looking for, if you've got a red Bordeaux or something like that, I think red Leicester is a really good, leaving Wales for a minute, it's a really good cheese to pair with a kind of classic red wine like Bordeaux. Because it's a kind of hard cheese and it's quite mellow. And also it's orange, which is fabulously festive at Christmas and Halloween, if you want to. What else have we got?
Are we able to ship to France?
Yes, someone's saying, my brother is a chef living in France, and I'm sure would love to share with his friends who think that only the French make great cheese. We know that. We know better, don't we? Are you able to ship to France, or are they too delicate to transport?
Yeah, it's getting easy now to ship all over the place. So yeah, we definitely can ship. Just give us a call or send us an email and we can sort it out. Yeah, it's not a problem.
There's a good tip from Bill King. If you have leftover ends of cheese, freeze them. Then when you fancy it, put the frozen odds and bits on a scale and weigh them. Put them in a food processor with an equal weight of butter and self-raising flour. Blitz to a fine breadcrumb texture. Roll into a long sausage, cling film, and put in the fridge for an hour. Slice the roll into thin discs and bake for 8 to 10 minutes at 180. The cheesiest biscuits you will ever taste. That sounds good.
Yeah, it does sound good, doesn't it?
I do something similar with kind of odds and ends. You kind of blitz them up in food processor with some garlic and some wine, a little bit of white wine, and then until you get a kind of spreadable consistency, and then you can spread it on crackers. And the French call it fromage fort, strong cheese.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of using up scraps.
Definitely. So right, have you tried the Dollas with the mead?
People seem to.
A few comments on that. It's a good combination.
Wow, have you ever paired blue cheese with craft chocolate?
Felicia say that. Chocolate goes quite well with blue cheese, actually.
Yeah, I like
little bits.
I like cheese and I like chocolate. I'm just not
wouldn't together. Maybe little small pieces, maybe.
Yeah.
Dark chocolate probably would be the best one.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of it's a question of taste, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one really good question we can try and fit in: is it the same bacteria culture in the Brie and the Cenarth? Obviously, someone who knows their cheese there.
Yeah, I mean, the Cenarth Brie has got more traditional sort of Brie de Meaux style culture set into it, whereas our Pearl Wen wouldn't have that in it, and it's more of a uniform sort of flavor profile. But the Cenarth Brie is probably a cheese that has got a big potential to give a lot of flavor impact with it, and simply because those cultures need time to get the flavor going. As it breaks down, the culture that we use actually gets more of the protein broken down in a different format. So that's hence why you get that more of that farmy, earthy sort of feel to it. But pretty much each cheese has got its own culture set. They're quite difficult to make, really. So we couldn't make a Cenarth Brie and condition that to be like that, although they'd look like that. But the culture set is in the milk from the offset, really. So it starts off really in the very early stages of the milk going into the vats. So it's quite complex, and you wouldn't really see them until about 10 days or 2 weeks into the maturation, how they're actually developing. So yeah, it's all fun and games, as I say.
I know, it's brilliant. Well, I mean, I think we could probably talk about cheese for another hour, but I don't think we can. I think we're kind of like on a strict schedule, and I think we've got to wrap up. But anything else you would like to say?
I think the Dollas is quite sweet with the mead. I think it's really good. I'm gonna eat more Dollas and drink more mead. I think that's me done for the night. I know what I'm doing.
Which to go for, actually. They're all such delicious cheeses. I really like them.
Well, I hope everybody else has enjoyed them as well. I hope everybody's had their cheese to put the orders in, and and it's a shame we couldn't be at Abergavenny, giving my tasters out to people. That's what I enjoy doing, and engaging with people and answering questions. That's the fun part of the job for me, really, is because it's a lot of hours, a lot of work here, but going to festivals and things is the fun part of it all for me. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really miss the festival this year. I mean, I've been for the last few years, and it's, I think, the best food festival. It's such a great festival, and hopefully we'll all be back next year.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah. Anyway, good to see you. And,
you as well. Thanks for that. Anyway.
Thank you everybody for tuning in, and hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
So hello friends of Abergavenny.